Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Underrated Roblox Games. Technically, you could count Super Scuffle in a Nutshell, the video I made a while ago, as an episode 1 or an episode 0 to this series, but this is going to be the first official episode of this series. And if you couldn't tell by the series name, this is going to be a series where I am going to be reviewing and going into depth about underrated Roblox games. These are mostly going to be games that I consider to be underrated, which to me could be a lot of things. Simply, it could be a game that just has a low player count, but the game itself has a lot of work and enjoyable gameplay put into it. Or this could be a much older game that has a low player count, but still holds up really well. Now, on to today's main topic, we are going to be talking about a game called Merc Fleet. This is a game I found through my recommended tab. The game at the time averaged around 50 to 60 players, which has changed over the past few weeks, but I was still interested in what the game was about. So when I booted up the game and started actually playing it, I was pretty blown away. If you have been on Roblox for a long time, you might remember a game by the name of Laser. The game was a fast-paced fighting game back in 2015. It involved running on walls and jumping around using both your melee weapon and your ranged weapon to kill your opponents. Now, think of that same concept, except swap out the epic minigames music for an OST that can only be described as gotta go fast, and, well, you get... Alright, so what is Merc Fleet? Well, Merc Fleet is a fast-paced shooter created by Team Thaumaturgy. The game basically revolves around you doing parkour and killing your opponents. If you really think about it, the game is basically a race to see who can kill who first, as both you and the other players are fighting to win the round. Now, there are a lot of mechanics and features to look over, so for this video I'll be separating it into 3 different categories. These being weaponry, mobility, and ending it off with gameplay. So with that all out of the way, let's get straight into it.
Maybe I should make a gun out of uranium. That sounds kinda funny.
First, let's go over what kind of weapons you will be using when playing Merc Fleet. When you go over to the dealership section in the main menu, you meet Sheldon. He is the creator of the weapons that you use within the game, and is also a contractor for some of the skins you can unlock in the game as well. Which then brings us to the dealership. This is where you equip yourself with all of your fancy weapons and utilities. As of now, there are a lot of weapons to pick from, each with their own unique qualities and playstyles. The first of these qualities being their stats, these being fire rate, damage, ammo, assist scale, max range, spread, bullets per shot, knockback, and even range of effectiveness, which is shown at the bottom through a graph diagrammed by range and damage output. Another important quality is the aim assist circle. When testing a weapon, you will notice a massive circle surrounding your crosshair. When you aim near a player, they will become highlighted with a red marker on them. This activates the aim assist, which will then fire at your opponent. I'll go into more detail about this in the gameplay section, but for now, that's all I'll say about it. The next area of interest to go over within the dealership is the utilities and movement tools. The utilities section is exactly what it'd sound like, utilities. As of now, there are only 5 within the game, these being the Firecracker, Gravity Shield, Star Cluster, Thermal Vision, and Invisibility Cloak. Each of the different utilities has their own unique set of properties as well. By far the best and most used out of all of the utilities is the Firecracker. The firecracker works as a multi-purpose tool, working as both an explosive and a mobility tool. I consider this utility to be one of the best just because of its quick damage and mobility use. If you ever run out of ammo and your opponent is low HP, simply by using the firecracker you can either just kill them or just run away with it. The next utility is the gravity shield. Now at first I thought this utility just was really lame, as it quite literally would just stunt gameplay, because once you send out the gravity shield you cannot shoot players once inside it. The only thing that could damage you is the explosives. So this completely shut down gameplay for your opponents and yourself if you don't have any explosives. The only way you can use this to your advantage is if you wait out your opponent, keep track of them, and just quickly kill them once the shield runs out. And for the new utility option, we have the Star Cluster. It's a brand new utility that was added recently that shoots out these 6 different bombs in the shape of a star. This tool is basically a higher damaging firecracker, except you lose the mobility aspect that the firecracker granted to you in return for just higher damage. As for the other two, I don't really find them that useful. Thermal vision just makes it so that you can see players anywhere. I never found use for this tool, mainly because after playing the game enough, you'll be able to predict where people are going and have the maps well memorized enough to be able to just chase them down. The invisibility cloak, on the other hand, is not really that useful, but can be used well. Basically, when you turn invisible, your enemy cannot lock onto you, so if you are using a close range weapon, this is pretty good to use to get close to snipers. However, the only downside I would say to it is that when you are close enough to a player, they can fully see you, and also when you are just invisible in general, there's this little smoke that'll follow you around. So if a player sees that smoke, they could just run away from you and there's no really point. Personally, I feel that there should be more offensive utilities like the firecracker and the star cluster. Like maybe make a smoke bomb that could obscure an opponent's vision and then when you shoot it, it explodes, or maybe make a sticky bomb that you can manually detonate and you could leave it somewhere. But now let's move on to the last section in the dealership, which is the movement tools. When you open up the movement tools section of the dealership, the player is given 7 different mobility tools. These being Dominion, a simple grappling hook that allows the player to fling themselves in the air at any angle. The Unextricator, I have no idea how to pronounce it, but this ability gives the player extra jumps and the ability to rewind time. Meteor, which is just a massive slam. The Gravity Augmentation Unit, also known as GAU, which basically just reverses gravity for the player. Shifter, which is a simple teleport mechanic. Whirlwind, which allows you to glide in the air, and Glint, which lets the player teleport in different directions. I'll go into more detail about these abilities in the mobility section for now, but that's everything in the dealership. I think as of now, the game has a lot of different options for playstyles. I'd only say the sections that are lacking in the dealership are the utilities and secondaries, but that'll likely change in the future as there have been sneak peeks of new weapons and utilities to come out.
I found you, Faker!
Faker? I think you're the fake hedgehog around here.
As I mentioned before, Merc Fleet is an incredibly fast-paced movement shooter. Because of this, the game gives the player a lot of movement options. First, let's go over your basic movement options which are given to you. Arguably your most used mobility option aside from your movement tool is your slide ability. By clicking shift while moving at high speeds, you will enter a slide. This ability is an easy way to build momentum off of just jumping and sliding or just sliding down a ramp. It's also good to note that when falling down from a high place, you will slide incredibly fast. As for your other mobility option, you are also given a wall run. To do this, simply jump near a wall and hold either A or D, depending on which side of the wall you jump onto. And when you feel like it, simply by just hitting the space key, it will send you up into the air. You also can shift which direction you are running mid-wall run by just turning your camera and clicking the opposite key. But honestly, I feel that this tool is mostly underused just because of how some of the maps are designed, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the wall run is just a nice tool to have when trying to escape a conflict or to catch a player off guard. This then brings us to the movement tools. Now, as I mentioned before, there are 7 movement tools in the game, each with their own unique abilities and purposes. The first of which being Dominion. As mentioned before, Dominion is a grappling hook ability and one of the 3 movement tools you will start off with within the game. When you hold Q, it'll bring up a bunch of icons in the sky. By letting go of Q while hovering over one of these icons, you will be flung into the air. This ability can be used in a variety of different ways and on a variety of different angles, giving the player different options of where they'd want to go. However, I think this weapon's only downside is that once you are airborne, you are going to go straight forward. So if an opponent sees you, they could easily track you and just gun you down. So it's a tough ability to use, which I would only mainly use to just get up into the air. The second free ability to start off with is the Unextricator. I still have no idea how to pronounce this. And it has two movement capabilities, one of which being a simple double jump, which can be pretty tricky for players to track onto you with, and the second being the rewind time ability. Basically, by holding Q, the Unextricator will bring you backwards in time. I like to use this ability when somebody's chasing me, just so I could back up behind them and shoot them myself. It's basically a counter tool depending on how you use it, and you can easily use it to turn the tables on whoever you're fighting. And the last free ability you start off with in the game is Meteor. And it is just a slam into the ground. There is really nothing special about Meteor, but you know, it's doing its best. Moving on to the paid abilities, the first of which being the Gravity Augmentation Unit. This is an ability that literally flips everything upside down. And depending on where you are, you can either send yourself flying into the sky or onto the roof of a building. This ability can get you to some pretty cheeky spots as well. For an example, on the map Hellpoint, you could just find some random area on the roof to snipe people on. Or you could send yourself completely all the way up into the air, only to slam down and just travel around at high speeds.
Here we go!
The next ability is Shifter. Now, this ability can either be the most aggressive or the most passive. Shifter basically allows the player to teleport instantly to wherever the marker is. You can use it to get up behind an opponent and blast them, or you can use it to just run away from your opponent. The ability goes very well with close ranged weapons, so keep that in mind. Whirlwind is the next ability, and this ability can basically be summed up as sliding in the air. Basically, when you use Whirlwind in the air, you gain a lot of momentum. Whether you're sliding and then you jump into a whirlwind, or you jump off a bounce pad, or just gliding around, you will gain a lot of momentum and you will go very fast. And the last ability available in the dealership, and my personal favorite, is Glint. Now this ability, in my opinion, has to be the most versatile, working offensively and defensively, and overall it just has the best movement. Now when you equip Glint, you are given 3 dashes. These dashes each have their own set of cooldowns, and when you click Q, you'll perform a short teleport dash into the direction you're facing. The ability makes movement just much easier, as the extra dashes allow you to clear gaps and travel much faster around the map. Along with this fact, because Glint is so fast, it's just a great tool to use to mix up your opponent and confuse them. The last thing I'd like to go over when talking about mobility in Merc Fleet is the different maps. As of now, there are 4 different maps within Merc Fleet, each with their own unique layout, and most of the maps in the game do pair really well with Merc Fleet's movement. My personal favorite of the 4 being Hellpoint. Now, when I started playing this game, I despised Hellpoint, mainly because of how difficult it was to traverse and also because I kept dying to the environment. However, after learning the map's layout more and more, I was able to use the map's layout to my advantage, learning how to fly up on the fan or to shoot players through the grate on the floor. And honestly, this map is just really fun because you're going to be running into players no matter what, just because of how many twists and turns it has. Alright, and now with that all out of the way, it's time for me to talk about the overall gameplay of Merc Fleet. Alright, and now we talk about the overall gameplay. So first, let's talk about combat. As I've said many times in this video, Merc Fleet is fast. Very fast. So fast in fact that without aim assist, it is very hard to kill people. In the weaponry section, I briefly mentioned the large circle that surrounds your crosshair. Once a player enters your line of sight, a small red box will be indicated on your screen. Then, all you have to do is hold down the fire key and you've lasered your opponent. Now, at first glance, this can seem like a downside to the game, as once you lock onto somebody, they are basically dead. However, going back to how fast you are, it is not that difficult to either simply outrun your opponent, or if you were using a close range or long range weapon, depending on which range you are using, going to that specific distance back to the damage output by range, you could easily turn around and gun down your opponent. If you don't want to use the aim assist or you just want to change your settings in general, simply by going to the settings tab, you can easily change your visuals, audio, HUD, and aim assist. As for the different weapons that you have access to, each comes with their own playstyle, which I've mentioned in the weaponry section already. Some weapons require you to get close, while others do higher damage at farther distances. So when selecting a weapon, it's good to know their stats and what tools you can use to best optimize your weapon choice. One of the more unique weapon styles in the game is the sniper rifles. Sniper rifles require you to use your scope in order to activate the aim assist. And as of now, there is a charge up for the aim assist bubble when you scope in. The next thing to talk about is the different rounds in the game. Each round features one of the 4 maps and a game mode. As of now, there are 3 game modes: Free-for-all, Team Deathmatch, and Rings. Free-for-all is by far my favorite and probably the most chaotic out of all of them. Team Deathmatch is a fun game mode, but can be pretty one-sided, especially when players are in the main menu or just AFK. And the newest and probably weirdest game mode is Rings. Basically, there are these giant rings scattered around the map, and you have to jump in through them. You get points when jumping through rings, and it's just a pretty weird game mode that doesn't really create any conflict or reason to actually kill any of the players, because all you have to do to win is literally just jump through the rings, and you'll easily get first place. Now, if I were to add a game mode, I think a King of the Hill or a Control Point game mode would be a lot of fun, because players would basically be forced to rush into combat and it would create a lot of chaos. Now, the last thing I want to bring up just real quick about the maps is the different events for each map. If you've ever hopped into a game of Merc Fleet and saw a massive UFO fall from the sky, or you got crushed by a giant pillar, those are the different map events. Each map event is activated in a different way, usually through shooting a projectile or object in the air. When doing this, this will activate a map event. These are usually just something being destroyed or shifted, like on Javari, where the floor splits open into a lava sinkhole, or on Hathor, where a gigantic UFO comes flying down from the sky. Now, the reason I mention these in the gameplay section is that they can actually be very helpful. When the gigantic UFO comes crashing down, it destroys the main towers in the center of Hathor. This gives long-range weapons the advantage on this map, as if you're in a server with a bunch of Victorian Polymetheus users, they will probably be running on the walls or in that general vicinity. So when you take away their close range and just give them a giant open field with a big UFO in the middle, using a weapon like the Basilisk will allow you to go absolutely crazy. So, in the end, what do I think of Merc Fleet? Well, I think the game is just absolutely amazing. The gameplay is incredibly fun and easy to pick up, and as for the future of this game, I'm honestly pretty hyped to see what comes next, especially with how in touch the developers are with the community on listening to suggestions. And with that comes the end of this video. Let me know what you guys think of Merc Fleet. If you haven't already played it, or if you have, then just let me know what you think of it, because I really like this game. And that's it. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys later.